It was one of those heat-heavy summer evenings where time feels slow and the air sits thick on your skin, daring you to move. The kind of night where conversations stretch longer than they should, and the river glows amber in the fading light, pretending it's more romantic than it really is. The reception was held under a tented pavilion at Riverside Hollow, an upscale, picture-perfect spot by the water with vintage string lights, wood-paneled bars, and just enough mosquitoes to remind you it was still summer in the South. Jenna and I arrived a little after 7. She was quiet in the car, humming along to a song on the radio she didn't even like. I remember watching her out of the corner of my eye, wondering what was on her mind. I asked if everything was okay, and she smiled, touched my arm and said, "Of course, just tired." The kind of answer you're not supposed to question. So I didn't. I'd been to a dozen work events with her before. She's in marketing at a tech firm, lots of ambitious types, all with big ideas and curated laughs. I usually hover at the edge of the crowd, drink in hand, offering the occasional chuckle or nod. I've gotten good at that. Jenna's good at floating between people, making everyone feel important. It's a gift, really. She knows how to take up space without making it seem like she's doing it. That night, though, she was different. She wore a new dress, Berg *NDY. Deeper in color than anything she usually chose, elegant but sultry. I hadn't seen it before, but I didn't say anything. I complimented her, of course, told her she looked amazing, and I meant it, but I didn't ask where it came from or what prompted the choice. I wish I had. The dress hugged her tightly at the waist and flared slightly at the hips, the kind of thing that turned heads as she walked. And she knew it. There was a confidence in the way she moved, not the practiced poise I was used to, but something freer, more alive, like she was stepping into a version of herself I hadn't been introduced to. She kissed my cheek as we entered the reception, said, "I'm gonna say hi to the team," and disappeared into the crowd before I could respond. I made my way to the bar, got a bourbon on the rocks, and found a spot near one of the wooden support beams just outside the dance floor. People were laughing, swaying to the music, holding plastic cups filled with punch and overpriced whiskey. I watched them without really seeing. My eyes kept scanning for her. It didn't take long to find her. Jenna was on the dance floor with Nathan. Nathan, of course. He's the cool one on her team. Mid-30s, lean, always tan, and annoyingly charming. Wears blazers over band t-shirts and makes Spotify playlists for every occasion. I'd met him a few times. He'd always shake my hand like he was doing me a favor. Too smooth, too familiar. And now there they were, dancing. It wasn't inappropriate at first. Clothes, sure. But they were laughing, swaying with the rhythm of some slow pop remix. I sipped my drink and told myself it was nothing. It was a party. People danced. I wasn't going to be that guy. The insecure husband glaring from the sidelines while his wife enjoyed herself. But then she touched his arm. Not in a casual way. Not in the way she'd touch her coworkers during a laugh or a story. It was slower. Her hand lingered. Her fingers brushed the inside of his elbow as she leaned in to say something close to his ear. And whatever it was, it made him grin. Not just smile. Grin. My stomach tightened. I took another sip. A long one this time. They kept dancing. Closer now. Her hand moved to the back of his neck, his to her waist. Their bodies touched, swayed in sync. It wasn't overtly S**Zool. Not in a way you could call out. But it was. *mate. To *mate. I looked away, suddenly hyper-aware of my heartbeat. I tried to focus on something else. The guy dropping hors d'oeuvres, the clink of glasses behind the bar, the soft buzz of cicadas starting to rise from the riverbank. Anything but them. When I looked back, they were gone. At first, I thought maybe I'd lost sight of them in the crowd. But then I saw it. The side gate near the tent, the one labeled staff access only, creaking shut. They had slipped out. I checked my watch. 8:42 p.m. I stood there for a moment, staring at the gate like it might open again and prove me wrong. But it didn't. The seconds passed, and so did the people. No one else noticed. Just me. I walked toward the edge of the tent and pretended to be watching the river. My drink was empty now, but I didn't go back for another. I just stood there, trying to breathe through the heat pressing against my skin. The night didn't feel charming anymore. Felt staged. Like I was the only one in the room who didn't know the lines. They came back at 9:04. I saw them re-enter through the same gate, a few feet apart. Not touching. Not talking. Nathan adjusted his shirt sleeves. Jenna smoothed her hair and fixed her lipstick with her phone's front camera. Like nothing had happened. Like they hadn't been missing together for 22 minutes. She saw me, walked straight over with a soft smile and eyes that didn't match. "There you are," she said, slipping her arm around mine. "You disappeared on me." I wanted to ask her where she'd been. I wanted to say I saw everything. But I didn't. I smiled and said, "Just needed some air." She kissed my cheek and asked if I wanted to dance. And I said yes. Because what else do you do when your world starts shifting under your feet but hasn't cracked wide open yet? We danced to a slow, crooning cover of Fleetwood Mac. Her arms wrapped around my neck, my hands at her waist. She smelled like something new, something floral and a little spiced, not her usual perfume. Her eyes met mine, and for a second, I wondered if she knew what I knew, if she could feel the suspicion quietly blooming between us. She laid her head on my shoulder, and we swayed like nothing had changed. But something had. It was small, invisible to everyone else. Crack, maybe, or the start of one. And once you see it, once you feel it, you can't unsee it. That night, as we drove home, Jenna sang along to the radio like she always did. But I watched her hands on the steering wheel, the way her smile never quite reached her eyes, and I knew. Couldn't say how. I just knew. Whatever had happened behind that gate, it wasn't innocent. And it wasn't over. The first few days after the reception felt normal on the surface. We went through the motions, coffee in the morning, small talk about work, dinner in front of the TV, but everything under it felt off. It was like someone had taken our marriage and shifted it 2 degrees to the left. Everything looked the same, but nothing lined up anymore. At first, I told myself I was imagining things. Maybe she'd stepped out with Nathan to take a phone call. Maybe she'd felt faint in the heat. Maybe it was nothing at all. I wanted to believe that. God, I wanted to believe that. But once the idea planted itself in my mind, it started to grow. Quietly at first, like a hairline crack in a windshield. Then, a little bigger every day. The late meetings started soon after. Jenna had always worked hard, but she used to be predictable. Home by 6, laptop on the kitchen table, glass of wine in hand while she caught up on emails. Now she was coming home later and later. She'd text me at 5 saying she had a client dinner or a vendor retreat. And by the time she got home, it was nearly 10, sometimes later. No explanation beyond a quick kiss on the cheek and, "I'm exhausted, babe." Her laptop, which used to sit open on the counter, was suddenly closed and protected by a new password. When I asked about it, she smiled a little too brightly and said, "Company policy. They're tightening security." That sounded plausible, but it didn't feel true. She never used to mind me looking over her shoulder before. Her phone changed, too. It was never out of her reach. She used to leave it on the couch, in the kitchen, even forget it in the car sometimes. Now it was always face down, screen dark, sound off. She tilted away from me even when she was just checking the weather. If I walked into the room, she'd hit the side button like a reflex. I tried to rationalize each thing on its own. People get busy. Companies tighten security. Phones get new habits. But together, all at once, it was like a pattern I couldn't ignore. Then there was the perfume. Jenna had always been a clean and subtle scent person. Light florals, citrus, nothing heavy. One evening, she came home from a networking mixer, smelling like a dark, oriental fragrance. Musk and spice. The kind that lingers on fabric long after the person's gone. It wasn't her usual at all. I asked if it was new, and she smiled vaguely and said, "Oh, just a sample from the store." But the next week, I smelled it again, and again. The clothes changed, too. New dresses, high-heeled sandals she'd never worn to work before, silk blouses that still had the tags on them. When I asked, she said they were for client events or team dinners. That was plausible, too. But in 10 years together, I'd never seen her by so much at once. It was in the garage of all places that I first saw something concrete. A charger sitting on the workbench, one of those long, braided cables, but not for any phone we owned. I picked it up, turned it over in my hands, and set it back down like it was evidence at a crime scene. Maybe she'd bought a new gadget. Maybe she was lending a friend our space. But when I asked her about it later, she said, "Oh, I don't know. Must have been yours." It wasn't. She started turning down our weekend trips, too. We used to drive out to small towns, try new restaurants, sit by the lake. Now she said she had work obligations, team retreats, or just needed to rest. Her calendar filled with vague blocks labeled vendor meeting and leadership offsite, things that never showed up on her company's public schedule when I looked. I felt myself becoming someone I didn't recognize. A man peeking at his wife's phone when she was in the shower, checking bank statements for charges that didn't belong, scanning her social media for clues. I hated it. Hated the tightness in my chest every time she smiled at a text that wasn't mine. Hated the voice in my head that whispered, "She's lying." But then I'd look at her, the same woman who still asked about my day, still laughed at my stupid jokes, still curled up next to me on the couch, and I'd doubt myself. Maybe I was paranoid. Maybe I was building a story out of coincidences. Maybe I was the problem. I started rewinding our life in my head. All the little changes over the past months. The nights she'd come home too tired to talk. The sudden interest in off-site retreats that didn't have locations. The way she'd touch her phone like it was a secret she was keeping warm. It was like playing back a movie frame by frame, looking for the clue you'd missed the first time. And the more I rewound, the more it felt like I'd been living in the wrong story all along. Even her smiles changed. Jenna's always had this open, easy smile, the kind that softens a room. Lately, it was different. Slightly delayed, like she was remembering how to do it. Her hugs were looser. Her eyes flicked away just a second too soon. Tiny things, but you feel them, you know. The nights stretched longer. She'd come home late, shower right away, and slip into bed with her back to me. I'd lie awake staring at the ceiling, telling myself I was imagining it. But my gut wouldn't stop whispering. Something was wrong. The worst part wasn't even the suspicion itself. It was the limbo, the not knowing, the slow erosion of trust, like watching a shoreline crumble grain by grain. Every time she smiled at her phone, every time she said work event, without looking at me, I felt another piece of our foundation shift. I started noticing Nathan's name more, too. Not on her phone, I couldn't get into it, but in the way she talked about work. Nathan's team pulled off a great launch. Nathan had this funny story about a client dinner. Always Nathan, never the other coworkers she used to mention. His name came like an aftertaste, unnecessary, but always there. One night, as she slept, I sat in the dark living room scrolling through our joint credit card statement on my phone. There were charges from restaurants across town we'd never been to. Hotels I'd never heard of. Small, boutique places with names like The Orchard and Riverbend Suites. They weren't huge charges. Not enough to scream affair on their own. But they weren't nothing. I closed my eyes and tried to remember the Jenna I'd known. The girl who'd sat barefoot on my porch eating takeout. The woman who danced with me in our kitchen at midnight. I wanted to believe she was still that person. But the evidence piling up in my mind made it harder every day. Felt like living with a stranger wearing my wife's face. By the time September rolled around, I'd stopped reaching for her when we slept. She didn't reach for me either. We spoke in small doses about groceries, bills, family. Everything else stayed under the surface, unspoken but loud. I started sleeping in the guest room sometimes, telling her I'd fallen asleep reading. She didn't protest. She didn't ask why. I kept thinking back to that riverside evening. Her hand on Nathan's neck. Their bodies slipping out the gate. 22 minutes. Played in my head like a looped video. If you slow it down enough, you can see the truth hiding in plain sight. And still, I said nothing. Because I needed more than suspicion. I needed proof. Something undeniable. Something I couldn't rationalize away. It was a Tuesday, gray, humid, and forgettable in every way except one. I had a half day at work because of a system outage. Normally, I'd text Jenna, maybe meet her for lunch or surprise her with takeout on her break. But lately, spontaneous hadn't gone over well. She always looked startled when I showed up unannounced, like a substitute teacher walking into the wrong classroom. So this time, I didn't text. I didn't call. I just drove home, planning to change out of my work clothes, maybe throw a frozen pizza in the oven. The driveway was empty when I pulled in, or so I thought. But then I noticed it. A dark blue sedan, parked just a little too neatly along the curb, almost blending into the neighbor's hedges. It wasn't a car I recognized. Newer model, clean, tinted windows. My stomach flipped before my brain caught up. I told myself it was nothing. I parked, grabbed my bag, walked up to the front door. It was unlocked. Jenna always locked the door, even when she was home. I stepped inside quietly, not because I was trying to sneak, but because something about the air felt wrong. The house was too still, like it was holding its breath. At first, I didn't hear anything. No voices, no footsteps. But then I noticed the sound, soft, muffled talking coming from the living room. I walked down the hallway, each step slower than the last, heart thudding so loud I could barely hear myself think. I rounded the corner and stopped. They were on the couch. Jenna and Nathan, sitting close, too close. She had her legs folded under her, turned toward him. He leaned in, one hand resting on the back of the couch, the other holding a coffee cup. His knees touched hers. They were mid-conversation, laughing about something. I didn't know what. My eyes were too busy watching the way her hand reached out, brushed something off his shoulder. Casual. Familiar. Mate. She didn't even look up. Neither of them noticed me right away. They were so locked into each other, the rest of the world didn't exist. And then she kissed him. It wasn't long or passionate. It wasn't the kind of kiss you'd write poems about. But it was a kiss. Her hand on his cheek. Lips to lips. Slow. Soft. Real. My keys slipped from my hand and hit the floor with a dull metallic clatter. That's when they saw me. Jenna froze mid-movement. Nathan pulled back like a snake recoiling from heat. "Thomas?" she said, breath-catching. Nathan stood, eyes wide, hands raised slightly. "Man, listen. This isn't." I held up a hand. I didn't want to hear it. Not from him. "I came home early," I said quietly, looking at her. "Didn't realize we had company." Jenna stood slowly, like her legs weren't sure how to support her. Her mouth opened and closed a few times before she finally spoke. "I can explain." Of course she could. They always can. "Don't bother," I said. "I saw enough." Nathan muttered something. An apology, maybe, and made his way to the door like a man fleeing a crime scene. Jenna didn't stop him. She didn't even look at him as he left. We were alone now, just the two of us. She sat down again, this time putting a cushion between us. Her hands were shaking. "Thomas, I'm sorry. How long?" She blinked, caught off guard. "What? How long has it been going on?" I repeated. My voice was calm. Too calm. The kind of calm that comes after the explosion, when there's nothing left to burn. She looked down at her hands, then at the floor, then finally at me. "Since before the Riverside reception," she said. "That hit harder than the kiss. That night. That damn night. The 22 minutes they were gone." I wasn't paranoid. I wasn't imagining things. That had been the start of it. Or maybe just the first time they'd gotten caught up in their own momentum. Either way, it was real. It had been real for a while. I nodded slowly. Not because I accepted it, but because I was processing it like math. Like an equation finally balancing after months of staring at the wrong variables. "When were you going to tell me?" Her voice cracked. "I don't know. I didn't know how. I didn't mean for it to happen, Thomas. It started with late nights, talking about work, venting. And then it changed. Right?" I said. "It always starts with talking." She didn't argue. Didn't try to defend herself. I stood, needing space, needing oxygen. I walked into the kitchen, leaned against the counter. My hands trembled as I gripped the edge of the sink. My chest felt tight, not angry tight, just hollow. Like something had been scooped out of me. She followed. I didn't plan this, she said. I didn't wake up one day and decide to hurt you. But you did, I said, turning to face her. You still did. She nodded, wiping her eyes. I know. Silence filled the room. The kind that buzzes in your ears. I stared at her. This woman I'd loved for a decade, and tried to find something familiar in her face. But all I saw was the version of her that kissed another man on our couch while my keys were still in my pocket. I walked past her up the stairs. I didn't know what I was doing. I wasn't thinking. I just knew I had to move. Had to see for myself. Her phone was on the nightstand, face down as always. I picked it up. It asked for a passcode. Jenna, I called. She appeared in the doorway, mascara streaked, lips parted like she'd forgotten how to breathe. What's the code? She hesitated. Thomas, give me the code. She didn't argue. She walked over, tapped in the 6 digits. Messages opened automatically. And there they were. Nathan's name at the top. The thread ran deep. Last night was perfect. Miss you already. Wish we didn't have to sneak around. Room 306 was better than the first one. Photos. Grainy hotel room selfies. A half-drunk bottle of wine on the table. A caption that said, "Best night yet." I scrolled through it all while she stood there, silent. No lies left now. No excuses. I dropped the phone on the bed, walked into the closet, pulled out the overnight bag I hadn't used since our last road trip, tossed in some clothes, toothbrush, charger. She didn't stop me. As I zipped it shut, she finally whispered, "Where are you going?" "I don't know," I said. "Somewhere that isn't here. Can we talk? Really talk? I'll tell you everything." Too late for that. She took a step toward me, but I stepped back. "I don't want to hear the love story," I said. "I just wanted the truth. And now I have it." I left without slamming the door, because sometimes silence is louder than rage. Jenna thought that after I saw them on the couch, after the kiss, after the messages, I would scream. Or cry. Or break something. That's what people expect from the betrayed husband, right? Rage. Drama. A big, messy, satisfying blow-up. But I didn't give her that. I gave her silence. And it scared her more than yelling ever could. I didn't stay gone long that night. Just drove around for a few hours, trying to clear my head, though nothing really did. I ended up in the parking lot of a 24-hour diner, sitting in my car watching the fluorescent lights flicker through the windshield. I didn't even go inside. I just sat there, the engine off, phone in my lap, staring at nothing. When I finally came back home, the house was dark. Jenna had left the porch light on, like she thought that would mean something. She was asleep or pretending to be. In our bed. I didn't climb in. I grabbed a pillow and a blanket from the linen closet and made up a spot on the couch. It wasn't about punishing her. I just couldn't share space with her. Not after what I'd seen. Not knowing what I knew. The next morning, she tried to act like we could talk through it. Like the night before had just been some kind of emotional earthquake. But now we'd clean up the rubble together. She made coffee. I didn't drink it. She said, "We should talk." I just nodded and stared at my phone. And that became the routine. She kept playing the part of the caring wife, like she could still reverse time by cooking breakfast or asking if I'd slept okay. Meanwhile, I said less and less, and started watching everything. Because if there was one thing I'd learned, it was that Jenna was good at pretending. Too good. I started saving everything. It began with the receipts. One day, I noticed a stack of crumpled papers in the center console of her car when I borrowed it to pick up groceries. Bar tabs, dinner bills, 2 glasses of wine here, an appetizer for 2 there, places we'd never gone together. Some dated on nights she said she was working late. I photographed each one with my phone and put them back exactly where I found them. Then I checked our shared credit card statements again, this time looking closer. There were small charges from boutique hotels, cafes across town, even one from a florist. Nothing outrageous on its own. But together it was a breadcrumb trail. And now I was following it. She left her email open once on the downstairs computer. That's how I saw a reservation confirmation for a restaurant by the lake. A place we always said we'd try but never did. The reservation was for 2. It was last Friday. She told me she had a late team meeting. I started digging deeper. One night, I logged into our cell phone provider's online account. I couldn't see the messages, but I could see call logs. And there he was, Nathan. His number over and over at all hours. Midnight, 6 a.m., lunchtime, pattern. A second relationship unfolding parallel to mine. I didn't confront her. I archived it all. There was something hollow in me now, something cold and clean. I wasn't looking for revenge. I wasn't even sure I wanted justice. I just needed the truth, all of it. I needed to see the full scope of what she had done, how deep the lie went. I even started using her apps, location tracking, fitness logs, mileage reports. Anything that told me where she was when she wasn't with me. The data painted a different version of her life. One with gaps. One that didn't line up with the stories she told me over dinner. She said she was attending a wellness retreat in the next town over for team bonding. Her calendar showed 2 nights blocked off. I checked the location history through the account she forgot to log out of. She never left the city. In fact, she spent both nights in a neighborhood I didn't recognize. I plugged the address into Google Maps. It was a short-term rental. A guest house behind someone's home. 5 stars. Private romantic getaway, the description said. She hadn't even bothered to make it subtle. I didn't say anything when she got home from that retreat. She kissed me like she always did, light, careful. The way you kiss someone when you're trying not to stir guilt. I asked how it went. She said, amazing. She said she felt reset. I nodded. Meanwhile, I already had *TS of the GPS data and the guest house's listing saved to a locked folder on my phone. One of the strangest parts was how she kept trying to act like nothing had changed. Like the affair was just a hiccup, an isolated mistake, something we could brush off and bury beneath routines. She'd ask me if I wanted to watch our favorite show. I'd say I was tired. She offered to make us pancakes on Sunday. I told her I wasn't hungry. She'd sit next to me on the couch, scrolling through her phone, glancing over like she was waiting for a cue, waiting for me to be the one to forgive her. But I wasn't playing that role anymore. A few weeks after the couch incident, I got an unexpected email from one of Jenna's coworkers. We weren't close, just a guy I'd spoken to a few times at company parties. Subject line, something you should probably see. Attached was a short video. It was from the Riverside reception. The same night they disappeared through the side gate. The footage was shaky, taken on a phone from a table at the edge of the dance floor. You could see Jenna and Nathan dancing, laughing, leaning in. And then, just like I remembered, they slipped away through the staff exit. Except this video caught the way she looked back over her shoulder as they went. Not like she was checking for someone. More like she was savoring it. Like it was a game. A secret thrill. I must have watched that video a dozen times. Not because I wanted to relive it, but because it confirmed what I already knew. That night wasn't the beginning. It was just the first time I noticed. After that, I started recording things myself, voice memos when I remembered details, photos of receipts, a folder of evidence too big to ignore. I wasn't gathering it for court, not yet. I was gathering it for me. Because when the time came, I didn't want to doubt myself. I didn't want her to rewrite the story. I didn't want gaslight and guilt to blur the facts. I wanted to be able to say, this is what happened. This is what you did. Some nights I lay awake thinking about how I used to feel safe in our home. How it used to be a place filled with laughter and shared routines. Now every creak in the hallway, every message ping from her phone, made me feel like a stranger in my own life. Jenna still tried to hold on to the illusion. She'd sit beside me in bed, flipping through home renovation magazines, talking about what we could do with the kitchen in the spring. I'd nod, but in my mind, I was already planning a different kind of renovation. A life that didn't include her. There's this moment, after betrayal, after the shock fades, when things stop feeling chaotic and start feeling calculated. That's where I was. By then, I wasn't just suspicious. I wasn't even angry. Not in the loud, boiling way people expect. What I felt was colder, sharper, like walking through your own house with gloves on, collecting evidence for a trial that would never see a courtroom. A quiet kind of clarity, dangerous in its own way. Jenna kept playing the part. She still made dinner some nights, still reminded me to grab milk when I went out. She even left sticky notes on my coffee mug once. "Good luck today. Proud of you." I stared at the note for a long time. Not because it moved me, but because it was almost impressive how easily she could slip between lives. But the truth was slipping through the cracks, and I was catching it. I'd already seen the texts, the photos, the receipts. I'd seen them on the couch. I'd watched the video of them sneaking away like teenagers at prom. Still, part of me wondered, was it just an affair? A stupid, selfish thing she'd try to bury and move on from? That hope, small as it was, died the day I opened her glove box. I wasn't even snooping, not at first. I was looking for registration papers. Her emissions test was due, and I was trying to keep things normal. Habit, maybe. Muscle memory from being the guy who handled the practical stuff. But there it was. A second phone. Small. Sleek. A cheap model, one of those prepaid burner types you pick up at a gas station. It was off. Hidden under a thin stack of takeout napkins and expired insurance cards. I turned it over in my hand, just staring for a moment. It felt warm, even though I knew it wasn't. I didn't know the passcode, but the notifications on the lock screen told me enough. Initials instead of names. Messages like "Sat confirmed. Room 214. And same wine as last time?" This wasn't just an affair. This was infrastructure. Planning. Maintenance. A second phone meant a second life. I brought it inside and set it on the kitchen counter. I waited until she got home, watched her eyes go straight to it, like her instincts kicked in before her brain could catch up. She didn't ask about it. Neither did I. The next day it was gone. After that, I stopped wondering whether she wanted to fix our marriage. She didn't. She wanted to protect her secret. She wanted to preserve the image of stability while building something else beneath it. And she was good at it. Too good. She still asked me how I slept. Still brought up my mother's birthday like she remembered those kinds of things on autopilot. I started to wonder how long she'd been practicing, how much of our marriage had been lived in parallel with someone else. One night I couldn't sleep. I ended up in the office, scrolling through the files she kept on our shared computer. She used to be careless. Not anymore. Most of the things I used to be able to access, her calendar, notes, documents, they were all moved, hidden behind new layers of security. But not everything. I found a folder buried inside a generic-looking directory labeled Q2 Expenses. Inside was a single PDF. At first, I thought it was work-related. The cover had a polished logo and professional layout. But then I saw the title, Red Oak, Boutique Wine and Small Plate Experience. It was a business plan, a full proposal. Mission statements, cost projections, branding mock-ups. She wasn't just part of it. She was listed as a co-founder. Right below her name, Nathan. His name was there, clear as day. Nathan R. And Jenna T. Project leads. I read every page. They had it all mapped out, property scouting, target demographics, opening timelines. There were personal notes in the margins. Comments about a soft opening next summer. And keeping this off the radar until things are final. Final. I sat back in the desk chair, staring at the screen while the pieces clicked into place. The vendor meetings, the retreats, the client events and leadership summits. All of it. It wasn't just cover for an affair. It was prep work for a life she was building without me. A future she'd already written me out of. I didn't confront her. Not yet. Because at that point I was studying her. Watching the way she kept the mask in place. The way she said we in conversations about vacations we were never going to take. At dinner the next evening, she asked me what I thought about taking a weekend trip up north. Just the two of us. I looked at her for a beat too long, waiting for a crack in the surface. But she smiled like nothing was wrong. Like she hadn't spent the last 6 months laying the groundwork for an entirely separate existence. Maybe, I said. We'll see how work looks. Later that week, She left her laptop open in the bedroom. I don't know if it was carelessness or confidence. I'd already seen enough. But I opened it anyway. There were messages. Most were from Nathan. But one thread caught my attention. A group chat with her and two of her closest friends. Women I'd sat across from at dinner parties. Women who toasted our anniversary with us last year. One message burned itself into my memory. From Jenna, about Nathan. He's everything Thomas isn't. Just 5 words. But they cut deeper than anything else I'd found. She wasn't just having an affair. She was rewriting me. Erasing the version of our life we built and replacing it with some idealized fantasy she'd crafted with someone else. A man I'd shaken hands with. A man who'd smiled at me while sleeping with my wife. That night I didn't sleep. I lay in the guest room, staring at the ceiling, my mind running in loops. The rage I'd expected never came. Not really. What came instead was exhaustion. A kind of grief that doesn't make noise. The kind that settles into your bones. She came in around 2 a.m. Stood in the doorway like she wanted to say something. I pretended to be asleep. She stood there for a long time before walking away. And I knew I wasn't staying much longer. But I also knew I needed one more thing before I left. Confirmation that she no longer cared who saw. Because once someone stops hiding, it means they've already left you. They're just waiting for you to catch up. I saw them at a cafe near her office. Jenna and Nathan, laughing like no one else existed. I sat just one table away, invisible. They spoke of their new project, a wine bar called Red Oak. Later that night, I found the full business plan on her laptop, our life replaced in a folder. In a message to a friend, she wrote, "He's everything Thomas isn't." That's when it hit me. This wasn't a mistake. It was her future, without me. A coworker sent me another video. Jenna and Nathan, kissing at the reception. Not hidden, not shy, right in front of guests. That was it. I packed quietly, left a note on the counter. "You've already chosen. I'm just catching up." I closed our joint accounts, filed for divorce, and left before sunrise. No fight, no final plea, just silence. She performed love. I lived it. Now I get to live without the performance.